Welcome back. And now for the news in detail, we start from Syria, where at least 21 government soldiers have been killed in a militant attack in northwestern Hama province. Monitors said 14 rebels were also killed in the rebel counter-attack against the regime forces. State media says several houses were destroyed in rebels' rocket attacks on a number of villages. War monitors said the assault comes amid an escalation in Syrian and Russian airstrikes in the region. It said more than 300 people have been killed by regime airstrikes and shelling in the area since late April. According to the UN, the bombardment has also displaced nearly 270,000 people in last month alone. Moving on, the UAE has said that tanker attacks off its coast were part of a coordinated operation carried out by a state actor. The UAE, along with Saudi Arabia and Norway, presented the initial findings of their probe to the UN Security Council. The three countries said the attacks endangered commercial navigation and the security of the global energy supplies. The reports did not mention Iran, which has been accused by the US of being directly responsible for the attacks. Iran has denied it was behind the attacks on Saudi, Emirati and Norwegian tankers. The attacks came at a time of rising tensions between Tehran and Washington. In another development, Mexico says it will deploy troops to its southern border with Guatemala to stop Central American migrants to the U.S. The Mexican Finance Ministry said it has blocked the bank accounts of 26 alleged human traffickers. This comes after Mexican and the U.S. officials held 2 days of talks on trade and migration. Earlier, President Trump tweeted that a 5% import tariff would be imposed from Monday if no agreement is reached. Following the talks, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said that Mexico is willing to do more to curb migration flows to the U.S.
And our message to the Mexican delegation, our message to the Mexican government, the time has come for Mexico to act decisively, to work with the United States of America, to assist us in enforcing our laws, by enforcing their laws, by securing their border. And we made clear to them that President Trump is going to continue to stand firm until we bring this crisis of illegal immigration at our southern border to an end.
Meanwhile, the U.S. has warned that it could impose more sanctions on Venezuela's state-owned oil company. Washington said that international companies selling dilutants to Caracas are at risk of future sanctions. Venezuela had long relied on imports of dilutants from the U.S. to add to its extra heavy oil to make it exportable. But the trade was banned in January, forcing the company to look abroad for other suppliers. This is the latest U.S. measure aimed at pressuring President Nicolas Maduro by limiting revenue from oil exports. Venezuela's oil exports dropped 17% in May because of these sanctions. China has condemned a reported U.S. sale of $2 billion worth of arms to Taiwan. Taiwan's defense ministry has said its shopping list includes anti-tank missiles and air defense systems. An informal notice of the sale has been sent to the U.S. Congress. The U.S. is the main supplier of arms to the island China sees as part of its territory. Last month, Washington and Taipei held their first meeting in 4 decades to deepen cooperation. For more on these developments, earlier we talked to our Beijing correspondent Patrick Falk. Patrick, tensions are also on the rise of a reported U.S. plan to sell $2 billion worth of arms to Taiwan. How do you expect China to react?
Well, there has already been some reaction from the Chinese. They say that the US is intentionally trying to provoke China, but it also says that this isn't just necessarily about the US wanting to provide security to Taiwan, as well as some other regions in Southeast Asia that it's provided arms to, as much as it is about boosting American business, particularly following the Boeing 737 disasters, which has seen America's largest exporters' share value plummet and also seen its credibility hit an all-time low. So the Chinese are saying that this is about America wanting to make money more than anything else. And if you look at this Taiwanese deal, just recently, in fact, the US Army said that its plant was only delivering 1 tank per month, but now it's saying that it's expecting to ship as many 30 tanks a month by the end of the year. And this is very much in line with Donald Trump's policy of expanding arms sales to its allies, partly also to boost American jobs. So it certainly does seem as though the US is having its cake and eating it, and doing some good business on the one hand, and on the other hand, rubbing up China at the same time.
Correspondent Patrick Falk was updating regarding the developments of the condemnation by China of the sale from the US to Taiwan of the arms worth $2 billion. Moving on, in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Theresa May has officially stepped down as the leader of the Conservative Party. May will remain as Prime Minister until her successor is chosen. Thwarted by her thrice rejected Brexit bill, May announced her resignation 2 weeks ago. She expressed deep regret over not being able to deliver Brexit in time. 11 Conservative MPs are vying to replace her as party leader and ultimately becoming the Prime Minister. May is the second British Prime Minister after David Cameron, whose political careers suffered at the hands of Brexit. Sri Lanka has just inaugurated a ship donated to its navy by the US. President Maithripala Sirisena attended a ceremony including a traditional dance performance by the Navy dance group. Sri Lanka's Navy's biggest ship arrived in May to undergo refurbishment before being officially launched. This ceremony comes while relations between the US and China have deteriorated. China has financed a series of infrastructure projects and sought closer military ties with Sri Lanka. Moving on, at least 17 people have died and 3 others injured as a bus coming from Oman met an accident in the UAE. Police said the bus crashed into a road sign on Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Road. 8 Indian nationals were among the dead. The bus service by a government-owned Omani company has been suspended for the immediate future. The African Union's Peace and Security Council has suspended Sudan from all AU activities until a civilian government is formed. The announcement was made after a meeting of member states in Addis Ababa. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed will visit Khartoum on Friday to mediate between Sudan's military rulers and the opposition. Calling for a resumption of dialogue, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have expressed concern over Sudan's deteriorating situation. The opposition says the death toll in a military crackdown has risen to over 100. Sudan's health ministry claims 61 people were killed in the operation. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has warned the global nuclear arms control system is in danger of failing. He was speaking at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Putin also said Russia is against US intervention in Venezuela. Here are the details.
The St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is Russia's biggest strategic investor event. Chinese President Xi Jinping attended the event this year. Iranian Deputy Oil Minister for International Affairs is also present despite US sanctions. Russian President Vladimir Putin shared his concerns on international affairs at the occasion.
We do not set up any military bases or anything in Venezuela. We do not send any troops there. It has never happened, but we have fulfilled and we will fulfill our contract commitments in the area of defense cooperation.
President Putin also warned that the international system for nuclear arms control could break down.
As a whole, in general, I think that all nuclear countries should be involved, all of them, official and non-official, because if we only involve those who are officially recognized as nuclear states, those who are not will continue developing it, and at the end the process would stop even between the officially recognized nuclear states.
Speaking at the forum, CEO of Russian oil giant Rosneft accused Washington of using energy as a political weapon. He said the golden era for the US was an era of energy colonialism for other countries.
A number of commentators like to accuse Russia of using energy as a political tool. But indisputably, the reality today is that the United States extensively uses energy as a political weapon. Sanctions, or even the threat of their imposition, has a destructive effect on the global energy market ecosystem. The US golden age can turn into an era of energy colonialism.
Rosneft CEO Igor Sechin also condemned US pressure on Chinese telecom giant Huawei.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping have been admiring the pandas China has given to Moscow Zoo. President Putin called the gift a sign of growing trust between Beijing and Moscow. The pandas arrived in April after President Vladimir Putin visited China. They have only now been shown to the Russian public. China has lent the pandas enclosure as part of a 15-year research project. After the pandas' presentation to the zoo, the two leaders spent time admiring the animals. In Malawi, police have fired tear gas at the opposition party's headquarters, where its president was meeting U.S. Ambassador Virginia Palmer. The U.S. ambassador was forced to hurriedly leave the building as police fired tear gas at the people protesting outside over election fraud. Opposition Malawi Congress Party supporters had gathered to protest in the capital Lilongwe. MCP activists allege its leader Lazarus Chakwera was robbed of victory. He lost by 159,000 votes to President Peter Mutharika. The U.S. Embassy is located next to MCP building in Lilongwe. A quarter of Ebola cases in eastern Congo are going undetected or discovered too late, says a WHO expert. Nearly 1,400 people have been killed by the epidemic, which began in August 2018 in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Here are the details.
The executive director of the WHO's Health Emergencies Programme, Dr. Mike Ryan, says the Ebola outbreak is not under control. He's warned 25% of cases in the outbreak zone are found too late or go undetected.
We believe at this point, and let me be very cautious here. We believe that we're probably detecting in excess of 75% of cases. We may be missing up to a quarter of cases.
Dr. Ryan says people with Ebola risk spreading the disease by visiting hospitals outside the outbreak area.
Transmission in the zone continues to be complex. More than 1/5 of cases seek healthcare in another health zone entirely before they're detected.
Ryan says people who refuse vaccines need more attention.
90% is great. 90% of people after vaccine take the vaccine. It's not them that matter now, it's the 10% that don't, because all of our cases are coming from that group. We need to make sure when people are sick that we can get them to isolation and to treatment quicker.
He also says the risks to aid workers have decreased, but discussed a recent terrorist attack on civilians. 13 people were killed by the Allied Democratic Forces, believed to be linked to ISIS.
In Germany, a former nurse was sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering 85 of his patients. The killing spree is considered the worst in the country's post-war history. Here are the details.
Niles Hogel's modus operandi was to inject his patients with lethal drugs. He would then put up a facade of struggling to revive them. The former nurse had already been convicted of 2 murders in 2015. Prosecutors brought further charges on him last year.
Niels Hogel remained a liar to the end. He now pays the consequences, and I hope it will never happen again in this life.
Hogel's lawyer said the verdict was not unexpected. Victim spokesperson Christian Marbach said hospitals where Hogel worked would be investigated next.
What's next is the investigation and trial against the hospitals in Oldenburg and Delmenhorst. I hope it will be combined so that the dimension and the connection of the 2 hospitals is made clear. I promised my family at the time that I would not only ensure that the killer is imprisoned, but also those responsible. I believe it's very important for all of us to bring those responsible to justice who made it possible that this series of murders became a series of murders.
Hogel initially admitted to killing 100 patients under his care on the first day of his testimony. He later revised that statement, saying he had murdered 43. Psychiatrist Max Steller told the court that Hogel suffers from severe narcissistic disorder. He added that this does not absolve him of responsibility for the killings.
Hundreds of tourists from the deck of a cruise ship waved goodbye to Havana in what could be their last trip to Cuba. This comes after the Donald Trump administration imposed a blanket ban on cruises and private yachts visiting Cuba. This report has more.
Thousands of Cubans have benefited from the boom in American visitors to the Caribbean's largest island. But President Donald Trump aims to punish Cuba's communist government, especially for its alliance with Venezuela.
I think Trump's policy is wrong because it's just like what other US presidents have done, and the reality is that it affects the Cuban population and not the government. I imagine it also irritates Americans because it's limiting them from getting to know the culture in our country.
US travelers became the second biggest group of tourists on the island in recent years. They hired drivers and tour guides and spent at private shops, bars and restaurants.
The travel ban affects us always because the more people that come into Old Havana, the more you can then charge to help pay for clothes, to feed ourselves, to pay for production costs because we don't depend on anyone else but ourselves.
Tourism revenues, the country's second biggest source of hard currency, already slumped nearly 5% last year. People are worried the new restrictions on US travel to Cuba will be a severe blow to their businesses.
We are going to go down because tourism was a means to sustain ourselves. For those who are self-employed, for the state, for everyone. We needed tourism because we're heading into a unique moment.
Cuba had been aiming for tourism income to increase nearly 6% this year, but it's hard to see how it can reach that goal now.
Russia has launched the train service through Arctic region. The tourist train carrying 91 passengers is heading for Norway.
The tour group director said that picturesque sights run along the train journey.
The Arctic is very appealing to passengers because the whole world is now talking about this destination. The Arctic attracts tourists.
Organizers said the whole trip will take 11 days and allow passengers to discover areas difficult to access by other means.
To the north, it's about 2,200 kilometers. This is the uniqueness of the Northern Railway. The tourists who are accustomed to comfort want to travel comfortably to the Arctic region to see the nature and the tundra. And from there, they continue on ships to get to the Arctic itself.
The tour operator said that the train is expected to run twice from next year and 4 times in 2021.
Norway has planned to immediately ban new fur forms and dismantle existing ones by 2025. Hailed by animal rights activists, the ban has been slammed by Norway's fur farmers. More in this report.
Norway accounts for 1% of world production of mink and fox furs, but the sight of baby minks snuggling up against one another will soon be a thing of the past, because days are numbered for controversial Norwegian fur farms. The Norwegian Parliament will adopt new legislation immediately banning any new farms. Under the law, existing ranches will be dismantled by February the 1st, 2025. The ban has been welcomed by animal rights activists throughout the country.
It's a big victory for animal welfare in Norway. It's a realization that the consideration for animals can actually weigh heavier than just money and enterprise interest.
However, for Norway's not so happy 200 fur farmers, it was a lucrative side business. Fur farming accounted for 70% of Norwegian farmer Christian Arsen's income.
It's a very big part of my total income, and I would have a chance to live off my farm in generally without the fur farm.
Morten Åsel Johansen, a populist right-wing politician, is overseeing the bill in Parliament. Despite his personal opposition to the ban, he took on the role to make sure it would be implemented painlessly.
I think the fur farming in Norway is over, so it won't happen. Now we are implementing the law, and then it's done, and I don't think anyone is interested to.
With the ban, Norway joins a growing list of countries that already includes Britain and the Netherlands.
Lows and the highs of the business world. Now, IMF Director Christine Lagarde has said the US economy is expected to grow by 2.6% this year. She urged the US and China to resolve their trade tensions because they would affect the global economy.
Our assessment is that the economy will grow this year at about 2.6% and next year at around 2%. And this represents an increase from our initial growth forecast by 0.3%.
In football, the Netherlands have advanced to the final of the UEFA Nations League after beating England by 3-1. England took the lead with a Marcus Rashford penalty in the 32nd minute. They held on to the lead until the 73rd minute when the Netherlands struck back with the mid-tide light header. Two defensive blunders cost England dearly in the extra time as the Netherlands scored twice to win. Dutch manager Ronald Koeman said the final would be won by the team that maintains possession of the ball.
No, it isn't a battle between two players. It's a battle between Portugal and Holland. And we know sometimes it's impossible to have good defending against Cristiano Ronaldo. I think the best what we can do is keeping the ball, to have good ball position. Because when we have the ball, he can do nothing in attack.
Time to take a look at the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. Stay tuned for further updates on Indus News.